it's Dr. Ginny here from Slender for Good, and I want to talk today about the amazing health benefits that come along with the right weight loss approach, because most of the approaches out there are not good approaches and they're going to compromise your health. And the weight loss, if you get any, is going to be temporary. And I don't want you to do that anymore. So I want to show you why kind of what you're being told out in the popular media is not really helping you. And you really want to focus on, how do I strengthen my health in a way that the weight loss is very natural, that my body naturally resets my weight to slender. I ended up deciding there's no other way. There's no other way to do this that makes sense. So there are hundreds and hundreds of studies demonstrating links between our diet, what we eat, and a whole package of disease processes like overweight and obesity, high blood pressure and heart disease and stroke, high blood sugar and diabetes, dementia, and various cancers. And it's good news ultimately because we can change our diet, but we need to be persuaded that it's going to make enough of a difference, right? So all these disease processes I just mentioned relate to cell metabolism and various cellular metabolic processes that are shown to be compromised by, for example, eating processed foods. In many cases, that looks like the biggest contributor to poor cell metabolism and cell death. And this is a big part of what drives our getting ill as we get older, when we should be able to be well up until pretty much the end, right? And now most of us are developing these diseases that relate to cellular metabolism. So I want to explain what I have learned about this. Cell metabolism is not a big area of expertise for me, but I wanted to understand, why did it completely change my health? Why did it reverse my health so much? Why does the research show over and over and over that the way that we eat has giant effects on cancer, on dementia, on diabetes and prediabetes, and on heart disease and all those things, along with pain and inflammation, which were big issues for me? Why does it make such a difference? So I study this stuff to try to understand. So these metabolic processes are shown to be very compromised. Our cells are very damaged by eating processed foods. And almost all the smart women and men that I know feel like we don't eat that much in the way of processed foods or fast foods. But after 5 years of helping only really smart, wise, well-read people with healthy eating and weight loss, I can tell you we're all underestimating the amount of processed food in our diet. We think this is healthy, this is wholesome, etc. I made this in my own house. So we're focusing on a particular aspect of processed food, not on the fact that we processed the food to be more palatable, to be more convenient. So we're all underestimating the amount of it we're eating. Research shows this as well. Too many of the foods we consider healthy and wholesome are processed. And it means we're also eating far too little of the real, whole, highly nutritious foods. You've probably heard me talk before about research in the UK, and research in the United States shows that 73% of the food in our environment is highly processed food. So even if you're doing a lot better than the average person around you, you're probably eating a lot more of it than you realize. So I'm going to talk about these different disease categories, a little bit about the research. Like I say, there's hundreds of studies showing that processed food, that the way we eat really highly relates to these disease processes. So when we observe groups with higher cardiometabolic disease and adverse brain outcomes like stroke, there's significantly lower consumption of ultra-processed foods in the heart healthy groups. When they observe countries with lower heart attacks, they find that fruits and vegetables, grains, beans, and fish represent most of their diet. Most of the diet in the United States and UK and all over the world now is highly processed foods. So one meta-analysis, so a meta-analysis is, so they're looking at 26 cohort studies, covered tens of thousands of subjects, right? They concluded from looking at this meta-analysis of 26 studies with thousands and thousands of people, higher intakes of fruits and vegetables were associated with lower mortality. And the recommendation was at least 5 servings a day. They did specify this does not include fruit juice or potatoes. Getting into the specifics of, well, what does that mean? Given that we're pretty misinformed, we've been misinformed our whole lives, it's important, right? It takes me, teaching the eating approach that I discovered takes me a good 7 hours. And that's after I help people get mentally ready to take in new information, because our heads are full of a mix of information and misinformation. So they're recommending at least 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. And the current average intake among US adults is 1 serving of fruit and 1.5 servings of vegetables. So very short of the recommended amount. And that's day after day after day. I discovered some very clear guidelines for quantities of the different types of foods that produce predictable and reliable results for sustainable weight loss. I was particularly focusing on women over 50 because I was in that boat, and it seemed like what used to work wasn't working anymore. So I wanted to find out, well, what works at this age? So we do find the same guidelines apply for younger women, and a similar set of guidelines apply for men. It's really the same guidelines with slightly different quantities for men, but there are 165 or more studies showing effective dietary interventions for preventing cardiovascular disease. And I did a survey of, I think it was 88 people who responded to it, who were eating this way, and asked them, what health benefits are you seeing in addition to the weight loss? And so I have this list of 88 different people talking about various things that relate to their heart and their blood pressure, that relate to their blood sugar, that relate to their gastrointestinal functions, that relate to their lab tests and their sleep and their energy, et cetera. So in the cardiovascular area, here's some of the quotes from that. I don't need statin meds anymore for cholesterol level concerns. So that reversed. I've been able to go off all blood pressure medications and all acid reflux medications. By the way, I'm not suggesting anyone go off medications without talking to their doctors. A lot of us have been able to go off lots or all of the medications we were on when we switched to eating this way. I was headed towards more and more medications, especially for pain and inflammation. And it's risky to have to use medications to manage this, especially when food can reverse so much of it. So another one said, 4 months in, my blood pressure is way down and I breathe easier during exertion. Another one said, no more high blood pressure. And another one said, I've gone off blood pressure pills altogether. So that's a really common one that we hear a lot. All right, let's talk about this other category of elevated blood sugar, prediabetes, and diabetes, which leads to a whole bunch of other conditions, right? Kidney disease, et cetera. So the research on diet and diabetes is very similar to the research on high blood pressure and heart disease. That's one of the pieces of good news here, is we don't have to eat this for our heart and this for our blood pressure and this for our blood sugar and this for our weight. It's the same eating approach that addresses all of these things. So one meta-analysis of 60 studies found that diet interventions with or without physical activity significantly decreased the risk of type 2 diabetes in high-risk populations and in general populations. So it's a lot of studies, so there were varied findings. They were looking at different things, but some consistent findings were that certain foods and drinks are highly associated with increased risk of diabetes, prediabetes, et cetera. Sugar-sweetened beverages, including artificial sugar sweeteners, also processed meat, red meat, refined grains, right? So processed stuff generally. Fruits were often found associated with lower risk along with whole grains. So one thing I notice in these studies as I go through is refined grains are associated with illness. Whole grains are associated with health. By the way, that's the last piece that I figured out for myself. I was very confused about grains because we get very confusing information. Avoid gluten, avoid grains altogether, et cetera. These have ended up being bad recommendations for the majority of us for our health. They're not quite right. They seem right because at first they give us a certain amount of benefit. So figuring out, well, what is the nuance here? That became very important to me. In fact, to lose the last 15 pounds, I had to figure out the grain piece. All right. So I personally reversed prediabetes. It was something that really concerned me. I didn't want to get diabetes. I got back into the normal blood sugar range, and I know so many people have had the same experience. So in my survey, some responses were, after 5 weeks of eating this way faithfully, I'm no longer pre-diabetic. Another person said, in 46 days, my blood sugar went from a 155 to 90. So into normal. Another person said, I don't have any more highs and lows with blood sugar. And another person was able to go off their diabetes medications and was no longer diagnosed with diabetes. So it really reverses that whole package of issues unless you've crossed a certain threshold and it's too late. So when I worked with people in the nursing home, it was too late for most people to turn it around. Most of the people coming to me, it's not. We can still turn this around. So we talked about heart disease and high blood pressure. We talked about high blood sugar and diabetes. Pain and inflammation is another area. So there's a lot of studies that find that diet, what we eat and drink, is highly linked to problems with inflammation and problems with immune system function. So I personally experienced dramatic changes in pain and inflammation. I had been taking anti-inflammatories, Advil, for 40 some years after an injury in high school. And it was hard, right? And I had gotten into, I'm going to need some other kind of pain medications for nighttime, some additional ones. And that's concerning, right? Any of these kind of medications that help are also causing downline problems. They're causing side effects. We don't want to get into taking more and more medications if we can help it. So I was able to go off all those. I also went from having trouble walking for even 10 minutes to being able to hike again for hours. So this pain and inflammation issue really resolved. Also, I was getting some kind of virus several times every year that was knocking me out for weeks each time. The last several times I had such bad ear infections that went with it that I ended up having to get tubes in my ears. So my immune system recovered in a big, big way, like saving a lot of time and money every year. So pain and inflammation is a big one that can turn around when we eat the right way. So here's what people in my survey said. One person said, I had daily fatty liver pain in my back, and that disappeared within 4 months of eating this way. Another person said, after 2 weeks eating this way, this pain I had in my knees for 3 years went away. Another person said, I don't have migraines anymore. Another person said, neuropathy is gone. Anybody get neuropathy in their feet? Another one said, I don't have pain anymore when I walk. And another one said, my arthritis pain went away. And it starts coming back when I try to bring back my old ways of eating. And one more person said, it's amazing. I wake up in the morning without joint pain. So we talked about pain and inflammation, diabetes, and heart disease and high blood pressure. Also issues of leaky gut and a lot of gastrointestinal issues and autoimmune disorders. So many of my clients have reversed serious GI issues and been able to go off medications for conditions like IBD, IBS, gastric reflux, etc. Getting our gut to work as it's meant to work makes us way more comfortable. It reduces symptoms all through our body. Our gut health is critically important for our immune system functioning and for inflammatory issues. So everybody's probably heard about leaky gut, when the intestinal system doesn't have the barrier that it should have, that it's letting things into our system that shouldn't get into our system. That's part of what causes arthritis, and it's part of what causes allergies. At least it's linked to those. Celiac disease, IBS, Crohn's disease, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, obesity, autoimmune diseases like multiple sclerosis, and even mental illness are highly linked to leaky gut. Our mood is highly influenced by our gut health. I hear this all the time from Slender for Good clients. With a couple of months, I'll hear them say, I just feel less irritable. I just feel like I'm handling things better, calmer. I just feel more lighthearted and able to cope with stuff. One of my clients recently was saying, I find myself laughing with my 13-year-old son where I used to be scolding him. So mood is highly linked to our gut, partly because that's where most of our serotonin receptors are. And serotonin is a happy chemical that's calming. All right, let's talk about cancer. So cancer is one of the 4 diseases that you very often see highly linked to our diet, which is something I didn't understand at all when I started studying this. Why would cancer relate? I have a lot better understanding of it now. You've probably heard about free radicals and antioxidants. So many cancers are strongly linked to our diet because our cells have to cope with oxidative stress all the time. And what happens is we can end up with free radicals in our system, these freed up oxygen radicals in our system, and those can be deadly, right? They can kill our cells. So we fight those by getting antioxidants into our system from real, colorful, fresh foods. So when we have enough of the antioxidants in our system, it helps us fight that oxidative stress and the free radicals. So when we don't have enough antioxidants in our system, and it looks like, I think 97% of people in our society are not getting enough of the real fresh foods with the fiber lattice intact, right? Not something that was broken down, processed and broken down, and then they said they put antioxidants back in it, or it still has a tiny bit of antioxidants left. We have to eat the real foods with the fiber lattice intact, not juiced, that's broken down. Our gut can only access the nutrients in a lot of our foods when those foods come in with the fiber lattice intact. The gut needs the fiber to be able to access the nutrition. And we don't get fiber optimally so that our gut, our body can access the nutrition by taking it in some kind of powdered or pill form. We get it from our food. So this is one of the big reasons why our bodies don't have what they need to fight cancer. And we can really change that risk in a lot of cases when we change our eating, right? And dementia is the other category of diseases that we often see highly linked to our diet. And I'm not going to go into that in depth today because I feel like this is long. It's a lot of different conditions that relate to how we're eating. So all these different health issues are highly related to our cell metabolism. There's at least 8 cellular metabolic processes that really determine our health and longevity. And if those are all really functioning well, we might live a really long time feeling really good all the way to the end. And if those aren't functioning well, then we're going to get cell death. We're going to get disease processes. We're not going to feel well. Like right now, more than half of us are spending our last 10 years sick and in decline with one of these chronic diseases of aging. None of us wants that. We want to avoid that, being sick for a long time and just in decline and needing people to help us because we have diabetes, which is a progressive disease, or we have high blood pressure, heart disease, or stroke, which can be progressive, or we have dementia, which is progressive, or cancer. So we don't want to spend our later years with those kinds of illnesses that are very tied to how we're eating. Simplest answer, the sort of most high-level answer about what works is we need to eat enough of the real, whole, highly nutritious foods for our cells to be well and for our body to keep functioning well, to set us up for a healthy, long life. And we need to avoid highly processed food-like substances. And we all need to get smarter about what that means, because it doesn't just mean junk food or fast food. It means we broke down something that was whole, that is highly beneficial for our body when it's whole. We broke it down to make it more palatable, to make it more convenient, to make it more shelf stable, et cetera, right? Remember when the pandemic started and we all went to the store looking for, the shelf stable stuff, which is understandable. If it's all we can get access to, it's what we should do. But when we can access real, whole, healthy, highly nutritious foods, we need a lot more of them than we're getting, because they do not do the same things in our body at all. The way I started understanding it, the more I studied this, is most of the food in my environment is actually harmful to my body, most of it. I'm not going to have a healthy, active, long life, feeling really well, independent, able to do what I want all the way to the end if I don't commit to a whole different way of eating that isn't the way I was raised. I was going to figure out what's truly healthy for my body, and I was going to strive to eat and drink that way. Eat and drink those things and only those things. Even though I had been highly committed to keeping certain processed treats that I wanted to consider pretty healthy, that the packaging said was pretty healthy, that, the food industry and doctors and everybody was telling me it's pretty healthy. This is a good, healthy alternative. Plus it costs more, so it must be healthier, right? So it's very different from the messages I always got in this culture of this thing, this indulgent thing, and that indulgent thing that I want to eat, that I hope is okay, is fine. Just don't overdo it. Just stay within a certain number of calories and you'll be fine. And it's just not true. It's just not what I found in the research. So I want to say one thing about research studies on diet and health, because people come to me all the time saying, I've looked at this stuff and it's not super clear to me. And I want to explain why that is. So there's at least 3 big reasons why looking at the research is difficult. Most people are not actually going into the research, but I have had other trained scientists tell me, I went and looked at the research and I did not come away being super clear. So there's complexity, there's inherent complexity to studying diet and health, right? There's a huge number of variables. Even if you just think about, you and I don't eat the same thing on a daily basis. I don't eat the same thing every single day, right? So what we eat has this huge variability, and it doesn't tend to be a variability that's under research control. So that introduces a lot of error into these studies. When we do find differences between groups, it could be caused by so many different variables we can't be sure. So they're always having to extrapolate from the data beyond what we really can be super confident about. Also, when it comes to what we eat, we tend to underreport the non-nutritious stuff we eat. This is something we find a lot in the research. The more I like something, and I know it's probably not really that good for me, the more likely I am to underreport how much of it I eat, or even to myself. I'll even fool myself, right? So research shows we tend to underestimate how much we eat and drink certain things. So that's another source of error in the research in these areas. Now, here's another big problem, which is that there's tremendous influence from the processed food industry on the research. So that's really influencing what we can trust and not trust in the research. But I can tell you, after looking at hundreds of studies and articles, there's a lot of studies. There's hundreds of studies showing certain high-level principles that I'm talking about. I had the ability to look at the research as a trained researcher. So I knew to look at research reported in peer-reviewed journals, right? Not reported in the popular literature. So we have to check whether the conclusions being reported in the study are supported by the methods they used. We have to also look for, are there a lot of studies confirming, are there studies disconfirming their findings and their conclusions? And it's important to always look for conflicts of interest. So if the processed food industry funds a study and then reports that processed food is not harmful, you might give that study less weight, right? But like I say, other trained researchers have come to me and said, I looked at the research and I just came away with a lot of conflicting ideas about how to eat. I didn't come away super clear. I wanted to be super clear, and it's a really good thing. It's really been helpful to me and all the clients I've worked with, being super clear, how do I eat to get these results? And then it's very predictable and reliable that they do get those results. So how did I find it when it's so hard for other people? I did have a particular advantage, which is I have a long background in evidence-based practices, studying evidence-based practices, understanding how we know whether we're following an evidence-based practice. And so I was looking for a handful of guiding principles. So if I look at hundreds of studies, what guiding principles rise to the top that are there every time, that are there over and over and over in hundreds of studies for predictable and reliable weight loss that lasts, and for improvements in health in those, at least those 4 kinds of diseases that we see so strongly linked. So these studies vary from observational studies where they don't have any control, but they're looking at two different populations, one that has this problem or one that eats that way, et cetera. And they come to some conclusions from that. And then I looked at others where there were well-controlled intervention studies and looked at their conclusions and all the studies in between. Some of the studies focus specifically on heart disease or blood pressure. Some focus on blood sugar or diabetes. Some focus on brain functions and brain disease. Others on inflammation and leaky gut and cancer. But the same four principles, as I studied this, kept surfacing for optimizing health in all those areas and for losing weight and keeping it off, even for women over 50. So it became really clear even what quantities of different types of foods to eat to optimize results. That was necessary for me because the general idea of nutritious foods wasn't clear enough. The general idea of processed foods wasn't clear enough. I needed to look at, well, what are they talking about when they say these people eat more fruits and vegetables, right? I needed to get into the implementation details and see, well, what am I actually going to eat? How much am I going to eat to get results? Because I believed I was going to end up in the nursing home in the next 5 to 10 years if I didn't figure this out. So I was highly motivated. So I found these quantities. It was very helpful for me in reversing the excess 60 pounds in a way that I could keep that, right? Reversing prediabetes, reversing my issues with pain and inflammation. And it's been very helpful having this great clarity about the quantities for dozens of my clients and thousands of other people I'm able to observe eating this way. So it just keeps working predictably and reliably. That's what I was looking for, and that's what I found. So I want you to know eating according to these principles is absolutely transformative. And it is not how we're eating. It's not very close to how we're eating. Even those of us who feel pretty smart and like we found a good healthy eating approach, if you're not getting the results you want, I can pretty much promise you, you're not close enough to what actually works. So that's true for those of us who care a lot about it, who have been reading a lot, who have been spending a lot of our time and energy and money trying to eat healthy. We're still pretty far from the truly healthy eating principles that surfaced as central. So why does a truly healthy eating approach produce such big changes in our bodies to transform our risk of very important chronic diseases of aging? At a high level, it comes down to two things. So eating in a truly healthful, slenderful way, I call it slender way eating. It means nourishing our body so it can be well. So we refuse to ingest processed foods and drinks. We're not looking for people say this is a better option, this is a more expensive option, et cetera. We're just refusing to put those things in our body because they are highly linked to disease processes and excess weight. So the body doesn't feel like it has to initiate processes that cause further damage, like insulin resistance and inflammation and oxidative stress. Those are all ways the body's trying to solve a problem that we're causing without realizing it by eating processed foods. So the other thing is it comes down to eating abundant, highly nutritious foods, way more than people are eating. So our cells and organs and systems are getting the nutrition they need to function their best. It's absolutely life-changing. I always tell people you have to step off the path you're on and onto a whole different path. We don't think of it that way. We're out looking for the latest tip every day. No, it's a whole different path. It feels different. Your body responds different. And it's something to stay committed to even while everyone else is over on this path. We can still eat with people. It doesn't have to be stressful or weird at all. But we do want to keep following an approach that actually keeps our body healthy. It matters. So when we're eating abundant, nutritious foods and avoiding processed foods, our body doesn't need to store excess fat. So it's a very natural way of resetting to slender. And some specialists believe metabolic syndrome is affecting 88% of us, most of us, right? 80% of us now are overweight or obese. And it looks like by the end of this decade, 50% of us will be obese. I had passed the threshold for obese. This is a way that our body's trying to solve a problem of not getting enough nutrition and getting too much of that processed stuff. So the same nutritional drivers of overweight and obesity are the nutritional drivers of high blood pressure and heart disease and stroke and high blood sugar and diabetes and many cancers and many types of cognitive decline and dementia and gastrointestinal disorders and pain and inflammation. So our diet is the number one most powerful opportunity we have for transforming our health and longevity. There's other things that are important, like exercise, but diet is number one. I'm going to share a graph to show you what we find about that worldwide. Our body wants us to carry excess fat when it's not getting enough nutrition. It's to protect us from starvation. And we're not going to trick or fool our body very successfully on this. You can take a pill or get a shot or have your stomach cut to be smaller. You're trying to fake your body into not being hungry. And at first, it's going to respond. And then it's going to fight back. It's going to try to save you. We're still not getting enough nutrition. And so the body knows it needs more nutrition, and it puts on fat to protect us from a lack. Some scientists talk about it as flipping a switch in the body. So they find that animals living in low nutrition environments, animals getting ready to hibernate, they exhibit this kind of fat storage, along with often elevated blood sugar, elevated blood pressure, increased inflammation. All of these processes serve to support us, to protect us, support our survival in times of famine. So it is ridiculous, right? That the way we're eating, our body perceives as a time of famine. We can only correct it by eating a lot of nutritious foods and staying away from the processed foods that are really damaging to our cells. So this ability that animals, and including humans, have to store excess fat and change our metabolic functioning. This is very advantageous in situations of famine, but it's disastrous for us in an environment full of highly processed, non-nutritious food-like substances. So let's come back to the good news here. We can wise up to this. We can see what's happening and take back our choices. We can recognize how distorted our understandings are about what's healthy to eat. You know, we tend to want to defend what we understand. We tend to want to defend what we like. It's very natural. So we have to have this wiser stance of, I'm willing to see where I've got this wrong. We can get very clear how different eating in this truly healthy way is from the way we learn to eat. Okay, I see that's different. That's over here. As long as I try to stand here and stand there, I'm not going to have a lot of success. That's something we find with evidence-based practices, is you either follow the principles that work at the level that works, or you don't get the results. You don't get the predictable results. We find this with our eating. So stepping onto a different path, we can still find abundant, highly nutritious foods in our environment, right? Most of us can find these foods. We can thoroughly enjoy eating these foods. We can empower ourselves to choose these foods day after day, meal after meal. It becomes more and more enjoyable as we get away from the processed foods. It's a completely different eating approach, and it's a completely different mindset from dieting. Can you hear that? So it's my mission to educate people about how this works completely differently from what you're being told, because I think we deserve to spend our lives in more enjoyable ways rather than stressing about what should I eat, what should I drink, and about our weight. I spent so much time and energy stressing over these things, and I could barely walk 10 years ago when I was 55. I could barely walk in the park anymore. Like my happiest life experience, just going for a walk in the park, was pretty well gone already. I think we deserve to live our best lives all the way to the end, whether that's 80 or 90 or 100. We deserve to live well and focus our time and energy on more interesting things, right? All the way to the end of our lives. And that's just something, it's more and more unlikely in these times. It really takes making an empowered and informed choice. And it's not hard to change it. It's hard to find good information. And it's easy to find a lot of misinformation about what's healthy to eat. So this is why I dedicate my time to figuring out, how do I share this? How do I share what I've discovered with as many people as possible, with a particular emphasis on women over 50? Because I think our communities need us, and I think we deserve to be living well and not fussing over this. So if you want to keep learning how this works for healthy eating and sustainable weight loss, and how what works is completely different, like, comment, share this video with your friends. Let's keep this going. Let's get a movement going. The more of us who are demanding more of the highly nutritious foods, the easier it's going to be. You can learn more also at slenderforgood.com. And if you'd like to explore, I have created a very well-organized, well-sequenced program of learning and coaching and support. If you feel like, wow, that could be just the ticket I need to make these kinds of changes, to get the results I want, and really put worries about eating and drinking and weight behind me for good, I'd be happy to talk with you. Book a call with me. You can just email me at drginnyt@gmail.com. It's absolutely transformative to our health when we figure out how to eat this way. And the weight loss is kind of a natural artifact of eating this way. You have to have the information to do it right. And a lot of people are going to benefit from having more guidance and support, right? All right, I hope this is helpful. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your takeaways. What health benefits have you seen when you've improved your healthy eating? All right, take care.